Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel. This is our part 30 of a long series that we've been doing for almost, 2 years now?
Yeah.
We've been recording more than 2 years, but this series has been going on since the last quarter, I think, of 2023.
I mean, in a way, you might call it where Scott Ritter and other people have their show number, this or that. This is where we, really said, okay, we're on a roll here. This
Right,
is
right,
me
right,
and Paul for wherever it goes.
right. Exactly. So just to inform the audience, in the description box will be the links to John's website. Please go to his website, sign up for the periodical, sign up for a reading. We will discuss in detail what that exactly is throughout the show. I will continue to post the links in the chat for you to go to his website. But the way this program is designed, it's supposed to be interactive. So the ones that are listening through the live stream on YouTube or the live stream on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, or the simulcast on X Spaces, type in your questions or ask for the mic on X Spaces. This is an interactive show. John wants to take your calls. We find it to be just more entertaining, and just more enjoyable when there's an interaction by the audience. So with that said, John, thank you for coming back to the channel here, and let me do some of the admin stuff in the background while you take it.
Okay, well, what a difference 2 weeks has made in so many ways. I think it was 2 weeks ago that we celebrated, or depending on your persuasion, had a wake for the first month of Trump's 47-month presidency. And with all the changes that happened, and then just a little overview of the things that are kind of key and important in the way things worked out is there was on the 28th of February that train wreck of a meeting broadcast to the world in the Oval Office, where with Secretary of State Mario Rubio on the side, there was close to Trump, his vice president, kind of poised on the flanks of, in between them, of the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, who actually Zelensky was on the side and they were flanking each other, who basically had a meltdown, picked an open argument, got the president rather pointedly angry to the point where basically he was trying to say to, I think what triggered it was that Zelensky was saying, well, you kind of saying, well, you'll feel it later. If you don't, you've got to understand that Putin's evil and Putin is this and Putin is that, and you can't negotiate with him. And of course, they were trying to say, look, we want to create a negotiated settlement of this war and end all the killing and destruction on both sides. And he basically, long story short, Zelensky, a bit on a coke buzz, was just not wanting to negotiate with the Russians, but wanted America to continue fighting. And then what triggered the vice president of the president when he was saying, and you watch, he's going to go after you after me. You will feel this, you will feel that. And suddenly Trump said, don't tell us what to feel. You're not in a position to tell us what to feel. You have no cards. You have no cards if you go to war. We have all the cards. The Russians have all the cards. Yeah, if you go to war, you'll just destroy your country. And they then had we're supposed to have a lunch, but what happened instead was they further talked some more, and then Trump kicked him out of the country. I told him, get on your plane and fly back to Kiev, fly back to Europe and take the train into your own country because you can't even fly into it because of the war. Um, and then what then that precipitated was something I've been predicting Trump would do even on New Year's Eve. I was on Coast to Coast saying I really feel that it's going to end up with Trump just declaring this war as Biden's mess that he created and pull the plug on it. And that actually has, and he chased that with action, just not just words. He chased that with basically switching off swift communications to all Ukrainian pods across the Ukrainian armed forces. So that they suddenly, and then when the Europeans were still taking the intelligence that they were getting and sneaking it into Kiev, he told them to stop it or else. So he's cut off, in the last several days, he's cut off Ukraine from all the intel that during the years of Biden was used to literally help Biden and his administration with NATO play proxy, play Ukraine as the proxy, but with them with their fingers on the buttons, on the satellites, giving the intelligence to arm and direct missiles fired deep into Russian territory, which, as I said earlier in other shows, that this was fulfilling at the end of last year my years anticipated concern that the Cuban Missile Crisis would be replaced by an even more dangerous present day Ukrainian missile crisis that would see, with the Russians simply saying, look, uh, you're not fooling us. The Ukrainians are only there to put their Ukrainian finger on the button and push what you have plotted, what your satellites are going to track into targets into Russia. So you, United States, you, Britain and France, you are at war with us. And we're telling you officially that you are at war with us. You can hide behind the Ukrainians all you like, but it's you who is launching these missiles deep into Russian territory. And we consider that an act of war. That's the biggest nuclear power on the planet telling the second largest nuclear power on the planet and some of the more chihuahua nuclear powers, France and Britain, that this could go nuclear. And it really almost did. When Biden was the lame duck president, he broke all constitutional protocols. And rather than make a calm, quiet, peaceful transition of his administration to the newest administration, as per the people's will and their vote, he actually, through his handlers, Blinken and what's his name? Anyway, kind of looks like Ichabod Crane without before he lost his head in the Headless Horseman. But the NSA chief Sullivan, who were really running against constitutional law, running the country with their other deep state denzians, and basically it's because of Russian restraint, because there are mature men and women in Moscow in the Security Council that Putin oversees. They and I've seen them all. And sometimes they broadcast their meetings. These men and women are grown-ups, not a demented man or woman amongst them. And they clearly saw the danger, but what they did is they ended up, as I'm reviewing this, I spoke about this weeks ago, that they managed to locate and systematically destroy all the MLRS systems that were launching the ATACMS and their crews, which mostly consisted of CIA people, US CIA folk, the military wing of the CIA, uh, crewing most of that with a few token Ukrainians. They wiped them all out. I don't think you'll see those little dots in the foyer of the CIA on the marble wall be officially stuck on that wall of CIA operatives that died in action. If they did, the wall would be black with dots. And then they were calling back and back channels saying, look, we know what you're doing, and we'll hunt them down and we'll destroy them all. just stop this work. So finally it happened. We literally, Biden kept doing this until the 20th of January when power was taken away from him and his handlers. And then all of that ceased with Trump. And then what started was an attempt to send envoys like Kellogg to start a dialogue with the Russians, something that for 4 years the previous administration had completely shut down. Not only shut it down, but had completely dismantled the US diplomatic presence in Moscow and the diplomatic presence in the United States of the Russians, and closing down, shutting up their properties, their embassies, their consulates, and the same happening in Russia. And so the first summit that happened surprisingly in Riyadh, which is, you would think it would be in Paris if you're going to have Paris peace talks again. But this world has changed. Europe is no longer the center of the world as it has been for 500 years, and it's Western European influence on the United States. The place they picked was Saudi Arabia in Western Asia. And it's going to remain the place where Paris-like peace talks that have not been seen since the Vietnam conflict back in the 70s will commence. Now, the first, what I've seen happen, a very positive development, is now I can see that Trump, who suffered immensely from getting bad advice to do his channeling chaos diplomacy of Trump 1.0, in Trump 2.0, I can tell by the way, the messages that are coming out of the Secretary of State, messages that Trump is making to the world, that I see a very positive evolution and development of Americans, as I predicted and hoped would happen, starting a very steep learning curve. American leadership, a steep in Trump's administration, creating a steep learning curve. And they're starting to get the real dope. They got rid of the guy who's on dope, Zelensky, and they started talking to these people in Russia. Sergei Lavrov, probably the most skilled diplomat in the last century, speaks fluent English, had been the UN ambassador to Russia in New York, living. I mean, I can't remember a time where Lavrov was not around. I think late 80s. It's amazing how youthful he still is. He's got to be in his 80s by now. And so anyway, I could tell because I watch Putin, and I don't have somebody tell me what they're thinking. I do what any of you can do if you just get online and start not sticking with your familiar news outlets and start looking at all the kinds of news outlets that are out there. You'll soon find out it's very easy to find out to what extent your news agencies in the West are shining you on down a primrose path to disaster. And so that's what I try to do with my Hogue prophecy reports, is I give you my links to my sources, and I encourage you to use me as a gateway to the alternative media, which is rapidly becoming the new real stream media. I won't call it mainstream, but the real streaming media. And you will find out what's really going on. And what you will find out also is that the Russians are being heard at last by the Trump administration and its cabinet. And fortunate it is for us, I see, that he did almost the impossible. He got all his key top cabinet members passed, even Kash Patel for FBI. He got them all passed. Kennedy passed. Tulsi Gabbard, a lot of resistance to her because she's going to shake up the whole U.S. intelligence blob. And she is doing it. And I can tell that she's now, because I know what she knows in regards to her experiences in the Middle East and all. She actually dared to go visit and find out what Assad, the former president of Syria, the now completely collapsed Syria, we'll get to that in a moment, and he is getting the right intel from her. And that when a man who is such a natural, instinctive channeler like Trump is, that he's going to channel what's ever before him. And for the most part, he's mostly channeling people who are really giving him real intelligence. And some of these people actually have, through their chains of associations, um, some of them are linked to some of the sources that I use. So we're seeing in the president's office, in his cabinet, more and more people are um, giving him real intel. Now, this whole Zelensky kerfuffle led to another great shock that overwhelmed European members and Canadian members of NATO. Uh, Trump, openly as he does, muses with intent sometimes, even though sometimes spontaneous, but it always has an intent to kind of shock and upend people. That's the way he deals. After a while, hopefully, I mean, I almost, when he was saying about, I'm going to own basically the Palestinians who are not named, I'm going to own this. Zionists in Israel no longer own the Gaza problem. I own it, and America owns it. We'll clean it up. We'll fix it. Even I almost got caught by that because that was so shocking but I'm writing a lot about this. It's my evolution with this since the beginning of Trump 2.0 will definitely show its evolution in my next 7 articles that I'm releasing in a few days, where I'm trying to communicate the essence of chaos diplomacy, which is what Trump does, and how it it's well, I use the metaphor of the philosophical frog speaking to the centipede from Aesop's fables, and I just build the whole set of articles around that. How it's I think Trump is half thinking about things and half improvising, and that's how it works with him because he's kind of that unusual offsetting medium. um, it's actually at some point I thought, my God, this is going to destroy his presidency, owning this. Oh, but what it really feels like now is that I mean, Netanyahu was kind of, because Netanyahu, for all his faults, is quite a clever political animal, and he's standing right next to him and grabbing his own podium, about ready to fall over, trying to hold himself up when Trump is saying, I'm going to take this. He's reading some notes, probably written by Jared Kushner, his daughter's husband, and the key Zionist in the Trump domain. And I'll take it. And he's not sounding really high energy. Well, I'll do this, but we own it now. You don't. And Netanyahu, to me, didn't know quite how to take that. On the one hand, he could say, thank you, I think. But what he did is, as was related to, he did 2 things. He took the power away from Netanyahu and the Zionists, and then threw the hot potato out there that only the leaders of the Arab world could grab, because they had to, because it was just too shocking to be openly, brazenly, although indirectly, never mentioned the genocide. He was basically saying, "Yeah, let's get them all out of there, the survivors." He even gave the correct number of how many people are still in Gaza that are still alive. Give or take 100,000. He said 1.8 million. I've been writing since September of last year that it's around 1.7 million survivors. But so everyone, it's like that Mr. Surprise that he is. At one moment, he's not somebody great with facts and figures, and then there, bloom, it just comes out of him, and it's just off by 100,000 to my estimation of how many Palestinians are left. So then it literally, by just kind of not resolving it and just letting it float there in front of everybody's horrified amazement, the reason why the dictator president of Egypt was not present is I think he was already trying to get together a counter offer. And it came a few days after the counter offer, which would be backed up by Arab Gulf oil, Saudi oil, would be a rebuilding of Gaza for the Gazans, who would not be forced out, because everybody knows that even if they put them in the Negev desert, like Jared Kushner was musing at one point last year, their next stop would be somewhere else, out of because very clearly this Zionist state of Israel wants to purge it of all Arabs. Maybe they'll just have a Tolkien group that will do the heavy labor work, Druze and the Druze and the 2 million other Israeli Arabs that have been there. They might be tolerated. But I mean, the Zionists have been fighting a demographic war since they started going into Palestine and taking it as their own. The Jewish settlers do not produce the number of babies that the Palestinians do. So this is really a demographic war that the Israelis can't win. And so their idea is get them all out of there. So, but it's not theirs anymore. Trump has owned it and tossed the hot potato to El-Sisi for now. And it looks like I have a sense that maybe northern Gaza as a kind of as a token prize to Netanyahu and the Zionists, he'll let them build the beachfront property on the north end of the Gaza Strip. But the other 2/3 of Gaza Strip is going to be rebuilt for the Palestinians, and we're back to square one with a much diminished property, because unfortunately, I think the price is going to be that the West Bank will be overtaken by the Zionists, and the 3.5 million people there will, well, that's another disaster for the centipede to walk through. I mean, the old story is, and I have two versions of the story. One is the basic version from Aesop. The second one is a discourse of my own master, my teacher, Osho, talking about it with a video. It's very entertaining. I mean, he's a great storyteller. He had everybody giggling like children, but basically the story is, there's a very philosophical frog, and he's been watching every afternoon as the centipede passes by his pond and is going for his afternoon walk. And finally he says, Uncle, then everybody laughed when Osho said, Uncle. It's very Indian. So it's a very Indian version of the story. He says, I want to know how are you able to walk with 100 legs, 50 on one side, 50 on the other side? How is that possible? He said, the centipede said, I never thought about it. I never thought about how I walk. That's a very interesting question. You seem to be a very knowledgeable philosophical frog. so he said, well, okay, I'll try to think. I'll put my first leg, then my second, and then he fell over. And he's completely messed up. All the legs are tangling, and he's saying, now you've ruined my life. You have, I can't, please help me get this idea that you put in my head out of my head. Otherwise I'll constantly be falling over. And then the frog said, well, I don't know what to do because I am just a simple frog. So uh, the story actually goes that well, what Osho did was really great with it. He took the story out of that and said, there's always people who are trying to tell you or to look at, how do you walk that way? How do you do this? How do you do that? And what their minds are kind of completely not able to deal with the innocence of sometimes it's better not to think and just do. I mean, so I went into this whole tangent with that actually brings in my two meetings with two beloved authors of mine, Tom Robbins. I met once, and he just died recently. He used to live just a few frog hops north of here, near Anacortes area, in La Conner on the mainland in the beautiful Skagit Valley, which is quite a magical valley up here of many magical things around the Pacific Northwest. And so I in the articles I talk about how how um, even throw Yoda in there. When Luke was supposed to levitate his own X-wing, he says, "Well, okay, I'll try." And then suddenly little Yoda said, "No, no try, do or do try. There is no." He said, "Either not try, do, or not do. There is no try." And so And then I bring that back into the spontaneity and the strange, crazy, chaotic genius of Donald J. Trump, who half knows what he's doing, but not enough to get it in the way and trip over his own many-legged um, solutions. And then I took it back into how saying such an innocently saying such an outrageous thing shocked the Arab world, shocked the Muslim world, and it immediately, because the Egyptians used to own the Gaza Strip. I think it was in the 1967 war that Israel occupied it and took it from Egypt, and Egypt was not upset because it really didn't want to be burdened with it. But the Gaza Strip property, which is, even though it's in the Strip, it's about the size of metropolitan London. And until recently, one of the densest populated urbanizations on planet Earth. And so anyway, what also happened is that despite the taking the problem away, and now it looks like they're negotiating to get Egypt to run it, with Arab help and Gulf money and Saudi Arabian money to rebuild it. And then of course I talked a lot about this weird thing that came up out of Truth Social, this called Trump Gaza. I have the video in my articles, and Trump Gaza is this very strange. I kind of looked at it and said, I mean, it's so in bad taste that it's actually hilarious. It starts off, and you see the ruins of Gaza Strip and all that, and then all these kids run out of the ruins, and they suddenly open up into this beautiful future where the beaches of Gaza are beautiful. There's these beautiful high rises, and the Hamas fighters are no longer in their camouflage anymore. They're still got their green arm headbands on, but they're dressed in drag and have long hair, and they're dancing belly dances on the beach. It's like, and then you got Elon Musk, who is eating a lot of great Middle Eastern food, and he's got the kids around him like he's kind of their Pied Piper. And then there's a shot of Palestinian kids all clean and in good clothes, jumping up and down to grab money, American money, falling out of the sky. And And then there's kids with balloons, with gold balloons that are shaped like Trump's head. And then there's there's a bunch of rows and rows in shops where people can buy Trump in a lounge chair, Trump doing this and that, all in gold. And then at the end, there's Trump as a huge statue in the middle of the boulevard of the new and improved Trump Gaza. And which kind of harkens to the golden calf. It's like, so all the Gazans, that if they could watch this, and the whole Muslim world, it's just like this sleazy, kind of Trumpian, sleazy New Jersey casino bump and grind kind of thing, with him kind of playing the golden calf. It's almost like, well, this is kind of a metaphor of shock that Trump does. And I hearkened back to his first season of with the OJs singing money, 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 money. And he's swaggering in, and he's doing his swagger. He's got the Trump helicopter. He's got the Trump jet flying over New York, and then there's Trump Tower 1, Trump Tower 2. And then these guys, you gotta have it, you gotta need it, the money. And then he's good. And he says, it's bad, it's bad. And then almost like he's trying to be as bad as Michael Jackson is. I'm bad, I'm bad. That bad is good. Being moneyed is good, bad. And the collision of paradoxes, classic to Trump's nature, is a Gemini with a Uranus conjunction. And I will put that aside, and we've got our first question. Comment.
Okay, Don, if you're the one that asked for the mic first, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask John about his understanding of the relationship that Kushner has with Netanyahu, or at least Kushner's father has with Netanyahu.
Well, yes, it's quite a close connection, so close that when Netanyahu used to frequently visit the United States, he would they'd set up an extra bed in Kushner's room when he was a boy, and he'd sleep in his bedroom in New Jersey. So yeah, it's kind of close family ties in a lot of ways and associations. Of course, Kushner's father later had gone to prison, I think, for doing some bad, rather criminal real estate deals. So yeah, I mean, it's.
And where I was leading this is I look at Trump as not one person. There's no way in my mind Trump would take on this, whatever he's taking on right now, without having some type of guarantees about his safety for him and his family. Because he's been involved in real estate in the 1980s in New York, and we were going to have to go up against the mob. And one of course, his lawyer was Roy Cohn, who was, of course, ends up being a lawyer for the mobs, but also, of course, was the lawyer for McCarthy during the Red Scare. And yeah. So
yeah, well,
I think my point is he's a person who understands the deal, and he understands you never go into a deal in which you can't walk away from it. So I think Trump understands the game of politics. And, one of the things I find fascinating is this recent Netflix movie about the WWE and Vince McMahon. And I have 100,000 people in a stadium, and how do you create these characters in which the people become convinced that the characters are real? And that's what I feel like what the game of politics is all about. Trump is he's playing in politics in trying to control the Overton windows among the masses, and trying to help them wake up to understand what it is, the corruption is that has actually taken hold of this government. And his role is to be the disruptor. But there are other people that he has to bring in order to guarantee the safety of not only himself, but of his family.
Yes, in fact, a lot of things are I mean, anyone who's read The Art of the Deal, he talked at length about how he learned how to deal with the mob and Cohn and all of that, and
So everything's transactional. That's why I'm saying, I think in my mind, when you're talking about Israel and you're talking about what's happening right now between Israel and Iran and Egypt and the Suez Canal and Ben Gurion, if you remember, Ben Gurion talked about a canal, and that canal, guess where it would go through? It would go through Gaza.
Go through Gaza, but they were going to try to use nuclear bombs to build it, but didn't work out. But and of course, Ben Gurion, I would just interject again for everybody that in my earlier articles, I had a real shock seeing all my heroes from Israel's leadership, past to present, all share, even Yitzhak Rabin, of all people, all share a real blind spot to their racism and to the fact that that the Israeli state is they, like Moshe Dayan, my favorite Israeli leader, very eloquently explained that, you know, because I'm bringing this in because it's not just the power politics and the balance of power politics. It's, we also have a genocide of Semites that hasn't been seen taking place on this planet since the 1940s. It just it just happens to be, let me finish, please. It just happens to be the other Semitic seed of Abraham that is undergoing a genocide. And so it is, so there's another element here, an element of that, which could upend everything, start a regional war, and then all your political ideas and all what the mob wants to do and all, it all ends up something destabilized.
And John, I was saying, you know, we talked about the Middle East and about Israel and what's happening in Palestine, but let's not forget there were 20 million people that were killed in the Stalinist policy, right? And there are 40 million that died under Mao, and there was millions in Armenia. It just seems like we're all hyper-focused just on this one event that we're seeing in the Middle East, but even a million, I think the numbers have been in Ukraine alone. So, you know, somehow those numbers aren't, you know, put into the public consciousness in America.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do with that, because I'm trying to make people aware. If you want to understand how Russia ticks and how it sees us and how this could be resolved, which is beginning to be resolved because it sounds like at last an American president and his cabinet is listening to the Russians. And already, even today or yesterday, Trump said, you know, I'm having an easier time with this problem with the Russians than I am with the Ukrainians, and I'm thinking of just pulling the plug on them. You know, if they don't come around to negotiating, the Ukrainians, who have lost 1 million dead and 2 million injured and wounded, the Russians have only lost 120,000. That's one of the biggest lies is the Russians have lost millions and they're doing human waves and all of that, just like this was World War II. Well, it isn't. The other thing too is that Russia, I come to this theme a lot because it literally, to understand this, will understand what will happen, good or bad, in these attempts. That Russia for 800 years has been attacked by Europe, invaded by Europe, a Europe that wants to take its resources, break it up, and subjugate the Russian people. So this is not a new story, and all it's done is climaxed all these centuries up to the 27.5 million Russians that were murdered in the last attempt to break up Russia. That was Europe, now Nazi Europe at that time. Many European nations were in the Axis alliance at that time, invading the Soviet Union in 1941. And, you know, little things that really get the Russians going. It's like when Trump made the mistake of saying, yeah, well, you know, and even the Russians helped us win World War II. Oh, it's like, I could imagine. I said, well, I can just see the stoic Russians rolling their eyes across 11 time zones after they hear that, because they actually watch the news around the world. I'm amazed how the average Russian on the street knows what's going down around the world. They are exceedingly literate in global issues.
But John, one last thing on that. I keep going back to, I watch the WWE and I look at the American people as those people sitting in the audience. And the genius of Vince McMahon was he understood you always have to have a heel. And that is the genius of the military industrial complex, is they create the heel. And the heel has been Russia after World War II. And then after World War II, it was Islamic.
That's over now. That's over now. That is completely over, because the military industrial complex of America has been exposed by this war as being a profit-based, not purpose-based, big, bloated, corrupt mess. And our weapons are not well made. They are, the F-35 is what, how many trillions of dollars they put into that thing, and it's still only one out of four F-35s is functional. The other three are usually in the shop, making more money for the military industrial complex. What people are seeing is that the Russian military industrial complex is purpose-based, and it creates much better weapons. They're ahead of us by 10 years in hypersonic weapons. And we push them there by dismantling the INF Treaty, the ABM Treaty, and just putting away all the checks and balances that could prevent another nuclear arms race.
But John, the thing that I just want to remind, I try to remind everybody I can, is that the powers that be, the puppeteers, all they need is a false flag event in a media that still hasn't identified the enemy, so they can create the chaos. And as long as the heels are in place, the narratives are in place as to who.
I just told you they're not in place anymore.
But let me say, I would disagree with you if you still poll the average.
You watch the next few years.
I agree.
Let us let time and events. Let us let time and events be the judge of both of us.
Well, I think what you're seeing happening now is he's trying to move out of NATO and the UN. What's happening now, Europe, though, and the governments in Europe will have to now fight for their survival, and now their survival depends upon a war with Russia. And so they could provoke a war. And if something were to happen to Trump, or perhaps there's an assassination attempt on his life, and they blame it on somebody like Iran, which they try to do at Butler, then if the narratives haven't changed in time, then they can provoke the American people to react in a way in which they want them to react, and allow us to go back on their timeline of events. Okay. So lead us to a totalitarian nightmare.
Yeah, you've got to, with all due respect, you've got a kind of a world view that kind of is a bit simplistic, I would say, and kind of trying to bring order out of chaos. That there's things changing now. For one thing, yes, that's what you'll hear on CNN and other places, what Europe is doing. And certainly Europe is freaking out. I was just, before you called, going to go into that, and now we can go into it, is that...
John,
no, please don't interrupt. Let me...
Yeah.
Listen, please. The thing is that Europe has nothing that they can build. They don't have a military industrial complex. That 800 billion euros is going to literally trigger an unexpected rebellion of the people across. You can have all these power structures and all, and they do happen, but they also, as they live, they also go into chaos and break down. For instance, we've been running a certain show with Europe dominating the world, the West dominating the world. That system is breaking down. All these systems eventually break down. Like anything in a changing, phenomenal world, they have a life cycle, and the Western domination of the world is going away. It's, in fact, been an anomaly. Most of human history has been more Eurasian centered than to the very beginning of human history. And every once in a while, the West kind of gets involved. And then we send them back to their mud huts until they have another crusade and stumble upon another maybe Arab Renaissance and go, there's something better. They got medicine here. They have hygiene here. Well, we're kind of going back maybe into a mud flat again situation. Maybe not. But the thing is, the the um, the European Union to militarize, I think, could very well be the trigger that causes the spread of revolutionary things that are beginning to happen in the United States, just like the last cycle of Pluto, the last orbit of Pluto, which happened in 1776 with Pluto in Capricorn, created the contract, the blueprint of modern democracy. And then in the following year, when it moved into Aquarius, it activated it from theory into a real spread. I mean, the 1777 to the end of the revolution was a very active, enacting of the theory of modern democracy. And it was then moving into the French Revolution, which really activated the spread of modern democracy. It was born here, but it was isolated here until it spread to Europe and changed Europe. The same thing happened in the Pluto cycle. It was in Capricorn when Jesus Christ was alive in his 33 in his 3-year ministry, and that led to his crucifixion. And then decades after that, around the time when Jerusalem was burned to the ground with the temple, it was in Aquarius. So, the Christian world, the Christian mission really began after Christ had kind of had the blueprint and then was crucified. And then it was enacted into a movement that spread all over the world, for better and worse. I'm not supporting or refuting it, but that's what happened. So it's
But John, just go back to your point about the United States. I agree with you to a certain extent. It was 1776 in which the United States created this American self-government that was predicated upon common law and the idea of these.
Let's stay with essentials. Let's get with the essential things. I know where you're kind of going off into detail land. I'm going to get a little Trump on you. I'm going to stay with essentials. It's like we're just going to stay with this, and because it's there's people out there that want us to move on.
Hey, done. Because of the way this is set up, if you're talking over each other, it doesn't record really well. So, but John, I think, because John calls into my show quite often, and he his perspective is that there are players out there that are pushing a certain narrative that I would call it, it's just an old Cold War mentality. I personally think that is starting to die out.
It is.
And I think that there are new epicenters in the world that will change world events. I personally think it's in the Middle East and in Asia. I think Taiwan's a major flashpoint, and
the BRICS.
That too. So I think that the strategy that the United States should have is bring Russia into an economic orbit with the United States. So there would be a multi-front war on the CCP if Taiwan is the flashpoint. So that's where I see the world kind of moving towards. But I want to, if you don't mind, there was another question that was a little bit.
Okay, yes. Well, just to finish with what you were saying there is, Brzezinski once warned, never let Russia and China unite. Well, now they're united. So that whole paradigm, they may try to pull Russia away. And actually, what's going to happen in a more kind of Trumpian, Aquarian, Uranian way is he is actually looking at something more like McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt were looking at as presidents. He's looking at a world, he literally with a thought ended the hegemonic era. He just told Rubio to say in his first speech, well, that hegemonic era is over. We are now seeing ourselves as one power amongst two others, maybe India later, I would conjecture and introduce, but the big three. I literally think the big three is we might even have Yalta too, but it'll probably be in Saudi Arabia at some point, where they're going to it's going to be a different paradigm. It's not going to be the old Cold War paradigm. It's not going to be the paradigm that Don was born out of the half a millennia of European dominance. Europe is not going, and Europeans are not going to be dominating the world like they were before. The Chinese are going back to do that. The Russians, there's also going to be a shift from east-west to north-south that is already underway. And that will see, you might even see Brazil become a very significant power in the world. And three of these powers are in also the BRICS. The other big thing is the BRICS is actually the basic structure that the multipolar world that even Trump and Rubio as the Secretary of State are saying we are a big power in a multipolar world. We're not in a unipower place anymore. So all the things that got us there, the Cold War and all that, are these things that are these other forces are trying to bring up and bring back, and it's not going to, in my view, in my prediction, succeed.
All right, John, there was another question that someone typed in the chat. Kent asked about what you thought about the lunar eclipse, but before you answer that, I'm not sure if you're aware, but
I didn't know there was lunar eclipse.
there's a lunar eclipse, a red blood
red
moon, the blood moon, I think is what it's called.
Blood moon, yeah.
That's happening on I believe it's the 14th
of March.
Of March, yeah.
Okay.
My understanding is it's on the second day of Purim. Now, are you familiar with the story of Purim? A little bit, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit, but why don't you relate it?
Okay, all right. So for the ones that are listening, Purim is basically a holiday for the Jewish people to read the Megillah. It's a scroll, the scroll of Esther. And it talks about how Haman was trying to kill all the Jews. And Esther, the queen, convinces the king that Haman was, orchestrating to kill Mordecai. And eventually the tables turn, and eventually Haman and his band of evilness gets assassinated. But so every year we read the Megillah, the book, the scroll of Esther, and it just so happens that this year, and we know that a lot of weird stuff has been happening in the last year and a half or 2 years. This year, the blood moon is on Purim. Now, according to the Jewish faith, when there is an eclipse, that's a bad omen. But if it's a blood moon, it means redemption. That's from the Jewish perspective. And it being on Purim, the redemption of the Jewish people through Esther, the Queen Esther, on a blood moon is a very significant moment for the Jewish people in terms of an energy flow to a positive energy flow that I suspect some big events are going to be happening in the Middle East. Now, I don't know what that exactly means. Now, let me just put that to the side and just add one other detail. I still do not understand why, out of the 5 red heifers that they have, 4 of them are still kosher. Why they haven't sacrificed them yet?
Hmm.
So assuming that they haven't, you know, everyone that's saying, you know, so they're being taken care of in, I think it's Shiloh or Shiloh, I think it's how they pronounce it in Israel, but Shiloh, it's in the West Bank. So I'm not sure why they haven't been sacrificed, but I would not be surprised that they're sacrificed before Rosh Hashanah, which would be September, October of this year. And this blood moon with it coinciding with Purim is a significant, there's a religious significance there that is very positive for the Jewish people. So with that, just with that backdrop, go ahead. You know.
Well, the other side of the Esther story, also that some people, I think the Talmudic rabbis like to discuss this, is that it was also something to do with you know, the evil king. Wasn't he a descendant of the surviving token survivors, including the king of Amalek? You know, that there was this whole issue of that there was the hand of Amalek was enough Amalekites had survived to be a part of this attempt to, you know, cause trouble for the Hebrews, that Esther had them wiped out, the last survivors of Amalek. So there's that side of this too, because this whole thing started with Netanyahu back decades ago in a mistranslation of Farsi, when it made it look like the Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, was saying that Israel would be wiped off the map. And his response through his offices was, "Think Amalek." And it came, I always thought it was from him, even though he didn't directly say it. But then when on October 8th, after the Hamas raid into southern Israel, he openly said, you know, this is Amalek and we have to crush it out. So it depends. It depends which side of the Hebraic view you stand on. I mean, I would say 97% of the current 7 million people, according to polls in Israeli newspapers, are basically saying that they're all for, you know, they've at least united with the tribe. Let our tribe survive. We'll do whatever we need to survive, and do what, even if it's unspeakable things like the genocide of the Palestinians and all, because it's a fight between two tribes. It's survival of the tribe. So it's not. It was kind of shocking to find out that only 3% of the people polled, Israeli Jews, saw that what was going on in Palestine and in the Gaza Strip was immoral, and it was a genocide. Otherwise, everybody else is fully on board. So you might say they would look at this Purim situation as maybe some defeat of Iran, you know, the destruction of Syria, utter destruction now. Now there's widespread mass murder going on because, well, that's what happens when you restore the people who used to run ISIS and Al-Qaeda into an Islamic State setting that is Syria, which is ongoing right now. Thousands of people are being murdered. Thousands of Christians, thousands of Alawites are being slaughtered. You go on X, you can watch it. It's terrible. And so, but that could be seen by a certain other point of view of a more extreme religious zealot Hebraic person as, well, that's a sign that Purim is going to get rid of them, and then we'll get Trump to get rid of the Palestinians, and then they would be singing praises from their point of view. Their anticipation is that the 14th of March will purge them of all the Amalekites, as they call the Palestinians. So that's now, the Jewish majority outside of Israel, I think, would be more on your side of the view. That is something very positive in maybe resolving this situation and bringing peace to the situation could happen. So thanks for reminding me about the blood moon, because I definitely need to comment on that in the near future.
Well, what's interesting, like the book of Esther, how do I want to phrase this? Once we go past the Messianic age, the book of Esther becomes more significant, and some of the other books less significant. And some of the super Orthodox hold the belief that certain observance will stop. Certain Jewish observance will stop, and the book of Esther actually becomes a core book, but instead of just a side scroll. All right. So there's that part of it. There are individuals in the scroll where they're hung. Haman's hung and his sons. All right. Now, what is interesting is it's tied to the Nuremberg trial, where certain Jewish words align with some of the Nazis that were hung in the Nuremberg trial. That means, and the book of Esther was written a long time ago. So there was there were Kabbalists. One thought is that the story of Esther never happened, but it was a hint of what will happen. It's almost someone in the past was telling the future. All right. And so during the hanging of one of the Nazis, he shouted out Purim Fest 1946 before he was hung. So there's a connection between the Nazis, Nuremberg, Purim, that was going. I mean, you got to remember, Purim was way before the Nazi Party, right? So getting back to what Don was saying, all right, there is slightly a connection of like this shift, this shift geopolitically away from Europe and into the Middle East and into Asia. It's pivoting around off of this Purim event. There's like the centroid of the rotation of these things is around this event. And
I think you're onto something here.
And I would not be surprised that this blood moon, because I don't know about astrology too much, but there's this idea that the blood moon helps with redemption, and it leads to a positive flow for future events this year. Because I'll tell you, ever since October 7th, many Jews will say this, and I'm I would say I fall into this category. Many Jews would say that at October 7th, or since October 7th, there just seems to be just a lot more personal and social friction, where just things just don't work. Things are just not aligning correctly, So,
especially in Israel,
so
on all levels.
Right. So a lot of people, they're either their health is declining quicker, or people have issues with money, or with certain family members, or whatever. But someone always has a story that's just a little bit off the normal path.
And just in a quick interjection, just in the bigger picture of what's going on since the 7th of October, is all things that are disjoining, like, this attack that Hamas did. The amount of people that were killed were mostly killed by the Hannibal Directive, and it's coming out. And so it's like saying, a lot of the hostages have been killed by Israeli forces and bombs. and willfully. And so there's people in Israel, there's a lot of, I'm gaining from what I'm hearing in Israel, a lot of people are looking at this like they're almost like going through a bit of what the Norse Ragnarok means, the destabilization of orders or traditions or things that this is how it worked and now it's not quite working. It starts that way. And it's sort of like, and I don't know, I think I really resonate with the idea that Esther, I'm going to reread the book of Esther from this, because that some scriptures will step back from their dominant controlled situation. We're definitely living in an era of that. That's why I was trying to explain that, kind of a world theory that I was hearing from the questioner is sort of like, it's not going to end up like that. It'll be something else, and it may have similarities, but Hebrews are from Asia. It's a strange journey, these 2,000 years that Hebrews becoming Jews have traveled all over the world. But it's not surprising to me that a lot of Jews ended up in China or Iran. It's a very big Jewish community in Iran and as well. So, it's Asia's day now to kind of be the center of things. And with the South, the global South gaining more influence than the global North. So yeah, it's changing, and I don't know. It's because everything, the things that we were used to. Another example is the IDF is built to do quick, powerful, decisive wars. But rather than follow that worked, this Israeli government with Netanyahu has had, how can you imagine it? A war that's 16, 17 months long, and the IDF is exhausted. The IDF the tanks are broken. They're parts, they got to build the parts. It's now coming out from my CIA sources, like former Larry Johnson, his sources are still in the CIA. It wasn't 800 dead. The Israelis in these fights they've been with Hamas and with Hezbollah have lost 5,000 dead. And that means with the recovery wounded ratio, you're looking to be 30 to 35,000 wounded, lightly wounded or seriously wounded. This for a small country of 7 million Jewish people, this is a catastrophic loss of life and injury. So that's not working. It used to work. It's not working. And now, my point being is things are not working. I mean, it's like, they invaded our villages and our kibbutzim, but I know of whole families that were blown up by Israeli tanks firing at them because they were hostages of a handful of Hamas people. I mean, I've even shown the Israeli camera shots from the helicopters where they're flying over crowds of fleeing people. Ironically, a lot of them dressed like the people at the rave, and among them, also fleeing, not controlling the people around them, are heavily armed Hamas people trying to run away from being strafed by rockets, and then the rockets blow them all up. It's out there. The cat's out of the bag, or the cat's is out of the bag. So it's like, there's it'll be interesting to see, and it'll be also interesting to see if there's another red moon this year. Sometimes there usually two, and I wrote a whole book about the red moons when the Christians were getting all excited about 3 or 4 red moons in a row. And they thought it was some big deal. I wrote a book about that. One of my 52 books.
Well, what is interesting is some rabbis that are knowledgeable in this subject matter is saying that that Rome or Edom is the term. Edom is Russia and not US. And because of the color red, the United States is not really red. The United States is something different. It's just that
well, Russia is now I mean, communist Russia is dead.
Well,
The new
that's true.
Russia is red, is white, blue, and red.
Well, that's an interesting point. You're bringing up a good point, because we're talking about, pre-Berlin Wall, post-Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
You know,
And see how subtle it is. We all have it. Is how subtle is the old lingering, building our worldview on something that's still echoing to something that's been dead since 1989, the Cold War, the first Cold War. And
do you
Russia
think
is not communist. People still think that Putin is some atheist communist. He never was a communist. He was a lawyer at a KGB, and he is an Orthodox Christian. Russia is an Orthodox capitalist Christian country. It's doing a heck of a lot better in a free market than we are.
when Rome started cracking and breaking up into prefectures, do you think elements of the Roman Empire migrated to Russia proper?
Well, in a big sense, when Rome divided into the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, the Western Latin-based Christian Roman Empire collapsed, but Rome lived on until 1453 as the Byzantine Empire. And the thing that's a significant part is the Greek and Russian Orthodox Greek Christianity, Nestorian Christianity, all of that which is really from the East, not a Western Christian spin-off. Still, I still feel it. I feel like I mean, a lot of my family's Christian, but when I talk about Christianity and I'm pulled to Orthodox Christianity, especially Russian Orthodox. It's and that is part of Rome. I mean, it came out after the Constantine Christianization of Rome, but the eastern part of it spread into Russia, and it is the core. It is the way in which the Russian collective soul, which is a real reality, expresses itself religiously.
So if someone asked you the question, that what's the color of Christianity? Like, the color for Judaism is blue. All right. So what's the color for Christianity?
Well, it's blue in context to its white field, the two
Well,
rivers,
that's true. That's
the
true.
two lines of the Mogen David flag.
But what would be Christianity's color or colors?
The color of love and redemption.
What color is that?
Erlösung, as the Germans say.
Well, remember what I said about the blood moon. Redemption is red.
Well, it's a new
The
birth.
red moon. The red moon
Yeah.
is redemption.
But also red symbolizes in Jungian symbology. Red is also what the Tibetan monks wear. I still wear it as a sannyasana vosho at times. The colors of the sun in the Hindu world is both the colors of dawn and the colors of sunset, which is for birth and death. So, so this very deep atavistic thing is in all of our roots of memory, collective memory. And red is a symbol of death and birth.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be the case in Purim if what you're saying is true. And something's going to die. There can be no birth without death. There can be no death without birth. They are intimately intertwined. I really experienced that in a revelatory way in 1981 when I decided I was going to off myself. After coming back as a Swami, coming back into the Western world and feeling completely not able to cope there. And then the thought came up, well, you have one of the most free choices you have and freedom that also means responsibility, is just to commit suicide. So I was on a golf course that nobody used in San Pedro, California, which was adjacent to the trailer park I lived in. And I decided Well, I think I'm going to walk towards the Point Fermin cliffs, and when I run out of cliff, I'll just fall down in the rocks in the ocean. And I meant it. So this presence came over me. It was only when you're really going to die, when you are actually going to die, and whether you're doing it yourself or you're in a situation where it happens, only then does this kind of thing hatch out. Where, as far as words I can say, is this: it's where life and death become as intimate as lovers, and they embrace. And it's a presence. They are so intertwined. Uh, Almost impossible in that experience to see which one's different from the other. And so I had this happening, and I realized before I go over, I've got to just sit and be with this amazing thing. And I wasn't copping out. I just sat in front of this little silver dollar tree, 5-foot tree, gum tree that was, and I sat in the golf course with up against it, and I just I knew that if I decided not to commit suicide, I would lose this magical thing that was happening, death and life meeting. And so I sat there for a while just to be with it, and then I figured, well, I'll let it come deep, and then I'll get up and walk off the cliff. And suddenly there was this energy that came up out of the roots of the tree into my spine, up my spine, and threw me 5 feet forward. Just like boom. My face planted in the crabgrass. And then I cried. I cried the miseries of the world out of my eyes, just pouring tears. And then when I was done, it was very quiet, except for a very soft I heard. And I looked over my shoulder, and there was the little silver dollar gum tree going with its little silver dollar leaves. And it was just like blessing me. Like it was. And I looked up into the sky, and the most beautiful tendrils of cirrus clouds were dancing and twisting and slowly moving in a deep, burning blue sky. And then over across the channel, Catalina Channel, there was the beautiful Santa Catalina Island, trying on new dresses made of mists that would best suit the late afternoon sun's angle. And I realized then that something, that the death in that meeting became something else. It became a state of descending grace, a silent message from all things that you are loved, that existence loved me, and that existence had created me as unique as anything else in existence that will never be created again. And therefore, whether people are aware of it or not, it is very, very precious, this life. But I had to get to the point of ending this life to be awakened to this. And so, I mean, it's something I talk about at length in a book I wrote about one of my favorite people. I never met him, but he was a huge teacher. I watched his shows all the time, learned so much about the world through him. Our paths almost crossed many times in my travels around the world. We even ate at the same restaurants sometimes, but we never met. Anthony Bourdain is his name. Amazing man, a man who thought a lot about suicide, as a man who was an existentialist in a way. And what happened was I was just getting over him dying, and I kind of figured I showed he was going to do it one day or another. But I was in the local grocery store, and there was magazines on the side, and there was this old lady that was in front of me, and she pulled out one of the magazines. And the opening of the book is about this little unexpected moment. She pulls out the magazine. She looks at Anthony. She's got it in her hand. She touches Anthony's face. Such quiet love. and then very reverently put it back. And that was the moment I knew I have to write a book about Anthony and his suicide and my attempt. So it became a book. It's called Anthony Bourdain and the Choice Between Mundane, and Spiritual Suicide, a personal reflection by John Hogue. Now, it's really about the tale of something Osho used to talk about to me and other disciples. He used to say, like, there was one time where if people would come to him, he would like, if somebody was in like a nervous breakdown, just beyond the pale, and they're saying, I can't make it. It's just, and he'd look at them smiling and he'd go, and he'd say their name, say, Dion, where you are right now is beautiful. You are very close now to committing a spiritual suicide. Now, a lot of people hear that phrase. I think it's one of the reasons why this book doesn't have a lot of readers, even though I explain it in the introduction, that it's not a bad thing. It's not like you're killing your spirit. It's about what happened to me, what could have happened to Anthony Bourdain, because he had the potential. But when people like Anthony Bourdain think about suicide, I don't see that as something sick or anything. I see it as, now there's somebody with spiritual potential. Everybody who's authentically trying to seek their inner truth thinks about suicide. Even Shakespeare must have thought about it, because how else would he write for Hamlet, to be or not to be? That's the question. That whole soliloquy is exactly about the kind of people who really want to find, even if it kills them, find out what the truth is. And so shows potential to me if you think about suicide that way, not impulsively like, oh, I'm not getting what I want. No, impulsives, just a fool's game. But where you really think about it, where you're confronted with it, whether you want to be confronted with it or not. And so the difference is that when this thing happened to me in 1981, I used the metaphor of I ended up staying on the cliff, and my misery went over and crashed into the rocks and waves. My identity with misery. It died. It committed suicide and left me on the cliff in the golf course with the tree. And so what has happened since that time, all these decades hence, is that the misery it's like a dead tree before me, cut in 1981. And it's still there, but I'm not associated with it. It's separate from me. And like plants do, that's why we love flowers and flower pots. I mean, we killed the flower, but it's still kind of showing, it still has a residual life. And the same in pine trees up here in the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes the branches that are knocked off by windstorms, they stay luscious and green for 6 months until they start slowly losing the pine needles. Well, in the same way, these long-held habits, life after life, that we keep collecting and focusing on, they have, it's just like if you suddenly are, if your problems are a bicycle called misery and identity, and when you start as a meditator to see how it's not driving you, you've unconsciously been trained to pump the pedals and make the misery go on and on and on. And what will happen in meditation is you will not stop the bicycle. You will have these moments where you stop pumping it. You'll see yourself more and more pumping the bicycle of your identity and misery. And then you'll stop. And then you'll stop more. And then one day will happen where you simply stop altogether. But the bike is not suddenly going to stop and give you whiplash. The bike has entropy. The bike has momentum of habit. And you'll see yourself on that bicycle, and those miseries will keep running with you until the bike suddenly stops on its own accord and you simply walk on. This is a subtle metaphor of things that I'm trying to say that are really beyond words. But that's what the book kind of looks at.
Do you think that women or men think about suicide equally or different?
They think of it like men and women equally uniquely think of it. I think both men might hide it more. Women might find a way to express and freak out about it more, although that's not also a given. But the a lot of men they'd rather drop dead trying than face the fact that they really don't want to keep trying anymore. So it's different, and of course it's different to people. But the main thing that is not different fundamentally is the mundane way of committing suicide is always impulsive. It has a quality of impulsiveness. The existential feeling of suicide is something that one witnesses and lives with, and either does it or finds a way to see beyond it.
I was reading a folklore book about different folklores tied to Buddhism that's in Japan. All right. And there was a common theme with the folklore. And it was dealing with, I think it was the Lotus Sutra.
Mm.
And they kept on, to be able to heal themselves, they kept on reciting this Lotus Sutra. I don't know what's in the Lotus Sutra, but the thing is there was this common theme about a monk is being tested, or someone's being tested, and there's a spirit that's involved in their life, and somehow they have to repent, and they're using the sutra to repent. In some of the folklore, they die and they come back to life as a different animal or creature, and something happens, and then they end up being something happens in the story. They either die or something good happens, and then they go on into the afterlife, with a better soul. I don't know much about Buddhism.
Well,
So
basically, the Lotus Sutra is in the most fundamental elements. Is when you see the lotus, it's not just seeing the lotus floating on the surface of the water. It is seeing it with more sensitivity and seeing how what makes it so great a metaphor is watch it in the monsoon rain, what a lotus does. The droplets do not make it wet. They just are like beads on top of it. So, the rains of life happen, but the lotus is not wet with them. It still remains dry. And if you look at the whole lotus, you have to look at the roots as well as the flower and the mud in which it's growing out of. The mud is the suffering of the world. But, sometimes, shitty mud, just there. I've seen a lot of lotuses in India. And so out of the muddiest, dirtiest gook comes the most beautiful flower that can take the rain and not get wet with the identity of it. The other thing too is that the Sahasrara chakra, when it starts opening up, sometimes people normally, if they're very sensitive and if they're having a very beautiful sexual orgasm, you'll kind of understand there's kind of a point. In fact, sex has actually been a great gateway for religion, because people would lose themselves in sex, and there'd be a few moments where their bodies melted away, their mind, there's no thinking, but there's this absolute melting away ecstasy that almost comes out of your head like opening flower petals. That's why they use that symbol from prehistoric times of the lotus flower. So the two ways in which people started to have religious experiences began with having sex and having an orgasm, or having become aware of memories of the 9 months in the womb, where they had no. I had that experience as well, where you had no identity. You were just floating. Your universe was your mother's nourishment, and you had no cares. You were in the Garden of Eden. And every birth is the Garden of Eden story, Act 3, where Adam and Eve are cast out. So go ahead.
So Darren Green has a question here. You know, we're talking about the lotus, but what about the lily pad? Anything spiritual about the lily pad? Or no?
Well, I'd have to consult my past lives as a frog here. Um, all I can say is the Frog Sutra, which is ribbit, ribbit, ribbit.
You're joking, right? There's no Frog Sutra, right?
I just created it. I just channeled the Frog Sutra. I never knew myself there was one. It just happened. The best way to meditate, we have this wonderful thing. We have these marshes not far from here, and now all the frogs are beginning to wake up. And there's going to come a point where it's just like it's still like, but it's going to be like that. And it's a symphony, a choral, a frog choral. And it's so alive.
There's another question here. I don't know if you want to answer it or not. I can answer it, but this is one individual typed a question dealing with Bitcoin.
Okay.
It's down. It's trading down. But do you have any opinions on Bitcoin at all?
My first opinion was I should have bought some when they were a buck. That's when it really mattered. But here's the problem. It's not about Bitcoin. These ups and downs. It's not about Bitcoin at all. It's about the problem of Bitcoin is a very Aquarian age phenomenon. It is where it is literally using complex mathematical numbers that are at a certain point cannot be computed so it has a limited number of numbers. Most of them are getting computed in the next 50 years. Some of the others in the 22nd century, it'll be like one Bitcoin, a few years, another Bitcoin, until it kind of ends, the Hitoshi theory. And Bitcoin is literally, and it's interesting, Trump's insight, he's definitely gets that Bitcoin is mathematical gold standard. What it is it's valuable because there's not a lot of it, and it will be less and less of it. So it has a value because it's like gold. There's not a lot of it. But the problem that is causing the ups and downs is that Bitcoin is not yet capable of really being a monetary transaction maker. In the case of simple transactions, big transactions like if you were shipping gold out of one place, if all the people are trying to sneak back all the gold that's been since Clinton been going out of Fort Knox and being used and played with, now they're literally preventing senators and maybe even the president who wants to go in there. They're saying no go in there, and I think the reason is that there's some rumors going on. It was on Redacted. With Clayton Morris was talking about it. I was watching it earlier today. That they might be trying to get all the gold a lot of it in China even back into Fort Knox, because a lot of it they've been playing around with it since the Clinton era. Renting it out, getting paid for it, and all that. Now they want to get it back before anybody looks, because they might have think that Goldfinger did steal it all. So the problem is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin, geeks and brain wizard people, they can buy and sell with Bitcoin. If you're Mr. Saylor, the multi-billionaire guy, yeah, it works. But if you're Joe Blow on the street and you want to buy a hamburger out of a unit of Bitcoin, even when Trump was at a place getting a shake or a hamburger, I mean, he was there, he was learning. Took him like 20 minutes to get the whole transaction done. Hey, that's just not going to work. Like a gold coin in the old days, yeah, pull out your gold coin, your silver coin, and your transaction's done. So this is not yet happening in Bitcoin. So that's the problem. And what is interesting though is I'm more interested at the aggregate of how it drops and how it rises. It seems like it's harder and harder for it now to drop to the seller of 20,000. It's now dropping to like 50 or 70 or, it's.
Well, right now it's trading at around 80 something, but it used to be at 100,000, but 109,000, but it's.
But in an aggregate chart, you got the high bit, you got the low bit, but the way for everybody is if the high, low, high, low, high, low has this direction or this direction. I mean, this is the most simple way I can explain to everybody that doesn't believe climate change is happening. It is. But if you're looking at, oh, that was a hot winter, oh, that was a really cold winter, yes, that's true. But if you really got to look at it, it takes time. You've got to look at decades of data, and you've got to look at how for centuries now, especially in this new century, the aggregate is up, up, up. Yes, we had one of the coldest winters in the United States has ever had. But if you looked at everywhere else in Siberia, in Russia, in northern Canada, it was hot, breaking all records. But it just so happened we were this pool of blue cold in those maps that show the higher than normal and the lower than normal mass temperature. And we're still going to be a hotter year than last year.
All right, we have another question. Do you think that Zelensky will really apologize, like recording a video like Trump asked? I didn't know that Trump asked for a video.
I haven't heard that he did, but he did have a video that he put out anyway. I watched that. He did put out a video. No, I don't think the man knows how to. It takes a really wise and big person to understand when you've made a mistake, and I think he'd rather see Ukraine destroyed before he had to say he was wrong.
Do you think that he'll do the deal with the rare earth metals?
This is another one of Trump's. It looks like it's going here, but it's really about something over there thing that he's doing. And he half knows and doesn't know what it is. He half knows where it should go, but it's also good for him not to know so that he can have sudden insights of a complete different surprise change. That's Uranus in his Gemini. His Gemini is his kind of bipolar or multipolar self, the twins. If you've ever had people who are Geminis in your life or lovers that are Geminis in your life, I once I dedicated the book on Anthony Bourdain, I think it was that one, where I said I want to dedicate it to one of my girlfriends of the past, and who was a Gemini. I said thank you for, and my brother too, who's a Gemini. I said one thing I love about, I didn't name them, but I said one thing you learn when you're in love, in some love association with a brother or a girlfriend who's Gemini, is you always fall in love with a crowd. So there's there's a lot of, and then I put in some other books that I did that I often, when I'm dealing with Trump, actually it was the Trump book, the first Trump book I did, I dedicated to them. And then if I do another Trump book, I'm just going to quote a lot of famous Geminis in the opening and in the closing of each chapter. The two dominant ones would be Walt Whitman, the famous American poet in the Civil War times, and the German composer and dramatist Richard Wagner, who's also Gemini. And Wagner was a guy who would say, "I have to go through my demons to find my angels." And Walt Whitman is the man who famously quipped about contradictions, because all Geminis at some level or another are walking, talking contradictions. I agree with Walt Whitman. In fact, in my last life, I was a Gemini, so I kind of appreciate that. If you have your South Node, it's usually, it shows you your last life, and it's in Gemini in my chart right now. Anyway, Walt Whitman said, I am big enough to contain all contradictions. That's a classic Gemini genius speaking. And the problem with Geminis is just one last thing for the next question. Thanks for waiting for a moment. Is that, um, I mean, the problem with how people judge Geminis, mostly unfairly, is because what they'll do is they'll if it's a case of doing a special series on Richard Wagner's life, they'll most people will pick somebody like Richard Burton to play Wagner. He played Wagner. I love Richard Burton, but he's the absolutely last person I would ever choose to play Wagner because he's a melancholic um, Scorpio like me, uh, and brooding person. And actually, if you're going to take a Welsh actor that could have played him better, I think Anthony Hopkins, when he was younger, would have played Wagner perfectly as a mercurial surprise, this and that. You know, I mean, Trump isn't morose and serious. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead with the question.
Yeah, there's a question here. Trump is calling for elections in Ukraine. Do you think that will really happen now or this year? And so
Well,
take a
no, I mean, because the problem is, and this is where hopefully they'll get an education from the Russians. I mean, what happened is this President Zelensky kept in power and did not hold elections in 2023, because he was 2019 he was elected in 20, so it's an off year. And so when he let that go by legally, he became a dictator. I mean, what else would have happened if President Biden, if there was no Trump and there was nobody running, and then Biden just decided to continue being the president? He would, of course, he couldn't. I'm using that as a hypothetical because the people have to vote for you. If Ukraine's a democracy, which is one of the biggest jokes I've ever heard, sad joke, uh, what did Zelensky do? But when he really meant, he promised, he won 82% in 2019 because he said, I'll even get on my knees and plead Putin to negotiate a peaceful resolution of this, which had been a civil war going on between Russian Ukrainians and Western Ukrainians, which tend to be a bit of right wing. The other thing too is that the biggest problem of the Ukrainian government is its deep state is run by very corrupt neo-Nazis. And and the other thing is that he would probably lose. That's the other thing. He talks about, oh, a lot. He probably, I think the polls, the way I hear people on the Ukrainian streets talk about him, they hate him. They think he's destroyed the country. And I think he has. I mean, the first thing he did is he threw all those promises that got him in there. The people asked him. He threw all those promises out the window when he suddenly had a little talk with all these big, brutish neo-Nazis from right sector and Azov Battalion and all these people who really are behind the scenes running this thing. And he's a perfect puppet because he's a Russian Ukrainian Jew. He even had to learn how to speak the Ukrainian dialect. And basically they told him, and he said, okay, we're going to tell you what you're going to do. You're an actor. You're going to remain an actor. You're going to play the president. And if you go against what we're doing, and they said this, they said, we will hang you on a lamppost in Kiev, maybe in Maidan Square. We'll hang you until you're dead. So they're really mean guys. So you got this problem in Ukraine that the Russians actually is one of the things they have to resolve to win this war is to denazify Ukraine. Now, there's two possible ways that could happen. But to your question, uh, the way things are going, I think what Trump is going to have to understand, he's going to have to step back and let Russia finish this war. and he's kind of getting there. He's so close to pulling the plug on the whole Ukraine project because it's not his, it's Biden's mess. Yes, it was some of his mess when he was in his first term, but I don't actually blame him that much for it because his first term was a mess because he was literally, they were trying to just shut him down and not give him right information. And it's almost like this new chance is really a new chance to really be president. That last 4 years was a mess. But I don't see where this can go. And actually what's happening in the last 48 hours is a major defeat of the Ukrainian armed forces in Kursk. They are in a rout right now. The Russians have launched an offensive. Half of the territory in one day. They lost half the territory they've been trying to hold on to since since August last year, when they thought they Europe and Zelensky are always talking about, and even Trump gets lost in ceasefires. Oh, we'll have a ceasefire. We'll stop this with ceasefire. The Russians very patiently keep saying, we will not accept any ceasefires. We won't, but this one ceasefire. And Putin said this a year ago. He said, the ceasefire that we will say yes to will be where the first step is all Ukrainian forces in the territories that we, under Russian law, through referendums of the people that live there, who decided to be part of the Russian Federation and no longer part of Ukraine because all this Nazi business and all the persecution and the killing of these people. I mean, I saw it in hundreds of hours of footage where people were in the middle of this war in the Donbass region. The Russian Ukrainians were saying, well, why do you, the question that Patrick Lancaster, really good reporter, has been there. He lives there, speaks fluent Russian. He's American, former sailor. He would ask them, well, what in Russian? He said, what do you think the Ukrainians want? Why, and these people in their basements, in the ruins of Mariupol and all that, with a war raging above them, they look at him and just like characters out of a Dostoevsky novel, they would say, they don't want us. They want the land. They want the industries. Because that area is the most industrial part of Ukraine. They want the mines and the rare earths and the coal and all that. They don't want us. They're wanting to kill us. And they were thousands shelling them for 8 years. Cities, civilians. I've seen it. It's unbelievable. And so finally, these people, they wanted to join Russia back in 2014, but Russia was not capable of handling the sanctions and stuff that would cause. And they were right not to do it there because they were able when 2022 happened and the sanctions bounced back on Europe and America. So they basically, Putin says, in late 2022, they had referendums in all the oblasts, of Lugansk, Donetsk, in the Donbass region, with the industrial-based region, and the other two Russian majorities that were liberated, they think, in Kherson and Zaporozhye. They had a referendum in all of these places, and the vote by a large majority was to incorporate themselves into the Russian Federation. So as far as Russian law, and Russians are really sticklers about their laws, their law says that they're trying to liberate these Russian provinces since late 2022 from Ukrainian armed forces. So if there's a ceasefire called, the Russians will say, okay, within 48 hours, all Ukrainian forces have to leave the parts that they still keep of these 4 provinces. And then then we will occupy them, those 4 provinces, with our forces. And then we will not have any Europeans, no, well, unless they're outside of NATO, like Austria or something like that. But this whole war is being fought for the reason that Ukraine was the last step in a 30-year encroachment on Russia to become a member of NATO. And in 2007, Putin went to the Munich Security Conference and warned them. He said, you promise never to go one step east after the Cold War if we allowed Germany to unite. You guys have been encroaching upon us all this time. And we want to tell you that if you think you're going to bring Ukraine and the Georgian Republic into NATO, that's our red lines, and it could cause war. So they nodded and forgot about it, and then the following year, they started the process of Ukraine over years becoming NATO member, and they actually trained the Georgian army to be a NATO member, and it started a war with Russia and South Ossetia, and the Russians came in 5 days to completely defeated that army, occupied Georgia for 5 days, switched off the Baku oil pipeline to Europe for a few days just to make a point that they could do this again, and then they left. Russians, when they tell you something, believe it. Don't say, oh, he doesn't really mean no. No, he's not a flighty, flaky Westerner. Russians, when they say yes, they mean it. When they say no, niet, they mean yet. And this thing Europeans have this retard button in their brains for 8 centuries where they just ignore that. They step into an invasion into Russia and get annihilated. The Teutonic Knights, the Charles XII and the Swedish Empire, the Livovian Polish Empire, the Napoleon Bonaparte in 1812 with the army of 20 European nations, followed by Hitler 129 years later with 3 million men. Now NATO doing exactly the same thing. The Russians see this and they say, you know, if you want a ceasefire, get out of these oblasts, but we're not going to see any foot of NATO in this place because you guys are the same invaders. We'll ask China or the army of Brazil or maybe the Indian army to be the peacekeepers. That's it. It's clear as light. Trump's closer to understanding that than anybody else.
We have, we have Don on. I think he wants to say something. You got to be nice, Don. But before you go on, Don, I just to answer the question about the Bitcoin, someone was asking about it going, you know, if I thought that it was going to go up. My perspective on Bitcoin is that it has a very high correlation to equities right now, the S&P 500. And since the equities are going down, Bitcoin will continue to go down. Once we start to see equities moving up, then I think you're going to start seeing Bitcoin go up too.
Can you briefly define for everybody what an equity is?
The stock market, the typical stock market. So the S&P 500 sells equities. Those equities are stocks.
And equities are defined as what?
Stocks.
Okay.
It's just
so it has to be a good stock. It has to be something that's got a future, you know, something that that's not just
it's a company with, you know, it's a publicly traded company that's on the S&P 500.
But again, it's the old problem will always be there. It may get, I didn't quite finish. This is a good thing to finish what I was saying about Bitcoin. Bitcoin will not really thrive if it cannot find a way to make investments or payments or barter or business as easy as it is to use currency, because people are just not going to be super geeks. They're going to want it simple, and I'm one of them.
Right. You know, the way to look at this problem is the fundamental aspect and the real economic value of it, which is what you focused on, and then the day-to-day trading aspect or the behavioral aspect of the price action. And I just think in this year that price action is going to be heavily correlated with equities. So if equities are down at the end of the year, Bitcoin won't be down. If equities are up, then Bitcoin will be up, independent of some of these other factors like
I mean,
the
yeah,
strength
I
of
mean,
the dollar or this reserve currency that Trump is trying to play out. I think
well, I think he's going to end up coming up with it just being a mathematical gold. And it could be that you could invest in Bitcoin as if it's your Fort Knox of numbers.
right.
And that I think is a nice option beyond gold or silver or other precious metals. The other thing too that's going to happen is commodities. More and more now, I've been saying for 20 years that commodities are also going to be part of the value system of an economy. In that regard, Russia's not a gas station pretending to be a country. It could end up soon being the number 3 economy of the world. It's now number 4.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so Don, if you want to come online here, you have the mic.
Yeah, I was going to ask John. The one thing we really haven't discussed was, I think, what Paul's been covering for a long time is the bioweapons programs, because that's, in my mind, like Pandora's box. Once you open that up, it's hard to put it back. And I think it was 1950s where, again, they made the claim that they could kill everybody in the planet for like less than $1. And if you think that somehow these power structures somehow will leave that development alone, do you not see, how do you see humanity coming to grips and trying to end this experimentation that's going on right now? And is there a way to put it back in the box?
Well, the first thing I would say is there are no it's not something that absolute mindsets can solve. It's not that 1 or 0. It's either 1 or 0. It's a little bit like having a Gemini lover. You're going to have to get used to the crowd. Not is she going to be like this way or that way. There's a bit of an absolutist expectation that I sense in your question, and it's really the kind of thing that I could talk 10 hours about, but it's a question that's kind of hard for us to answer on the show, where there's so many other people have different views and things they'd like to
Well,
have talked to.
let me phrase it a little bit differently, because one of the things that I see is this powerful group, these puppeteers, whatever you might want to call them, like some criminal syndicates, is that they sort of have a psychopathic tendency to try to want to control people so that they always understand what the future outcomes would be, because they never place a bet of which they can never know the outcome. And I see this movement from Orwell or an Orwellian sort of sense of control to Huxley and then the ultimate revolution with the pharmacological means, now to Harari with the idea of the hackable human. And it seems to me that's the direction we're going, idea of a hackable human. And I've started to see the conversations now developing. I think the person who's connected to RFK Jr. is talking almost as if, like the Amish, is there a way to opt out of this transhumanist movement? Or is it, again, like Pandora's box, once we've let it go, there are people that will pursue it and you can't put it back in, but is there a way to opt out of it? And if you opt out of it, is there not the chance this breakaway civilization, you will never be able to compete or know that you're actually being enslaved by them, because they'll have the tools to make you feel that you're not enslaved?
I think it's time to opt out of intellect. And the answer, intellect just keeps finding new things to figure out that create more problems and then figure out. It's like a pruning of a tree. The questions, it's the tree question, the tree that's called a question bush is where you have seeking answers, and there's all these, but there's too many questions. So you try to start pruning them, and what happens when you prune a question is there's 3 or 4 more. My approach is to it's not going to be solved by this merry-go-round of the mind. It will be solved by that which witnesses the mind. intellect is has its virtues, but intellect cannot observe itself. And but the intriguing thing is that a witnessing consciousness, which is not the mind. I mean, the problem is your questions. My experience of this question like this is a question of it's a mindfulness question. It's too full of mind. It's not. I would ask you to relax deeper and observe your mind functioning from a place of that isn't the mind. And then the mind is a terrible master, but it is a wonderful for servants if you center yourself in the heart. And therefore, I'm going to be Alexander with your Gordian knot question. I'm just going to take out my sword and chop it in two and move on.
The last question I have was it's funny when you were talking about the colors, and you were mentioning what the colors say Christ would be, or and the one thing I did kind of ask Grok to go through and ask the question, but I asked him which color would he, out of the four that he mentioned, he said white and yellow and gold, blue and red, and I said which one would he choose to most associate with Christ, and he said red. And it was the idea of this redemption of the blood of Christ and going through this process of redemption, which I thought was interesting. But the one thing I find with Trump that was Grok's was this idea that Trump seems to be associated with gold, and he keeps talking about this golden age, and the fact that Elon references this Novus Seclorum, again, this new world order, with this idea of associating with the golden age
and the golden dome.
Yeah, well, let's look at it in astrology. He is a very powerful Leo rising. The color of Leo is gold. Sometimes when he is more in Leontine mood, he wears a nice golden amber tie. When he's more Gemini, he wears a pink tie. And then sometimes he wears the red, because Trump does know. I mean, I do it in my when I'm on TV, I wear the same uniform. Trump, the idea of, this is what, Hillary Clinton with all her different pantsuits in 2016 was a real bad move, whereas Trump was always in his red, white, and blue, red tie, white shirt, beautiful French indigo blue suit. And I say, well, I do that. I mean, I mostly do TV in a Renaissance kind of black or red, one of these. Because I look good in it, and my brand then stays the same. So it doesn't get all lost in Gordian Knottian things like Hillary Clinton did. The pantsuit might have been the reason, the pantsuit problem might have been the reason why she lost.
But is your idea of the golden age, is that reflective of anything symbolically as
not an idea?
Okay.
That's my answer.
So
it's just you have a wonderful mind. You have wonderful things that you do with your mind, but as wonderful as it is, it's also a Gordian knot.
Well, there's times when people make associations that aren't really there.
Yeah. I mean, you're pruning. I just when I try to think of trying to answer your questions, I mean, this is not the first time we've been doing this, but I keep thinking, gosh, it just gets more and more tangled. It goes from here to here to there in all really wonderful ways, until you're kind of suddenly, it's too tangled for me to untangle for you, because something deeper than the mind has to untangle it. So I'd simply cut it.
Well, can I give you a Jewish perspective on this, John?
Sure.
All right. So the way I see it is that different eras will have a different type of Egypt. All right. Or a different slavery era. All right. And we are all worldwide in Egypt, and there's going to be a moment in time where there's going to be this mass exodus from the chains of slavery of the modern age. So, my take on this is that, yes, I'm concerned about 1984. I'm concerned about Brave New World. I'm concerned about the national security state and the overreach and the loss of constitutional freedoms. These are all legitimate concerns. But I also have the belief, I'm going to use the term belief, and hope that there will be an age, a messianic age, if we want to use that as a term, where all people will be able to get out of their Egypt, get out of their slavery. And during that process, because it's not going to be due to us, it's going to be due to a higher power that does this. It will unravel all this for us. So we don't have to worry too much about the puppet masters. In the immediate term, yes, but in the long term of in the context of humanity, humanity is not going to unravel it. It's going to be this messianic age or Godhead or however you want to phrase it that does it for us, because we've created such a hell here on earth that there is a Godhead that fixes it for us. He goes, you know what? All right, you've gone to the abyss. You went right to the event horizon. You're about to commit suicide as a society, and I'm going to pull you back. And that's just I have some concern about this, but as a societal level, at a worldwide level, I think the Godhead will fix it all for us.
Well, another way of looking at it with different words, but same more Eastern way of looking at it is the divine is the source of us. And the strange paradox is that it starts with somebody becoming a messenger, a Moses, a Moshe, a Zarathustra, a Jesus, a Buddha, a Krishna, whatever. I mean, just using this idea is where one among us, through an undividual experience, no longer divided, having retapped into the lost source, then teaches that source either through the Western way of a personification of the divine, or in that's a theist way, or an atheistic, luminous atheistic way, which is there is only the godliness. It doesn't matter the term. It is the same thing. That's the theory that each individual has to find. And the strangest thing is the way to untangle the Gordian knot is not through the mind as the master, but as the servant to the no mind, that which is not mind, which is this source. So the strange thing is that the coming back to your innocence, your wisdom, the godly source, can only happen one individual at a time. But in a day and age like this, with communications that we have in the Aquarian age, each individual, this message can be impacting millions of individuals, alone with other individuals going in. That couldn't happen in Buddha's time or Moses' time. It really had to come out of one person. And so my solution is to get as many people understanding self-observation, no self-observation, to begin the journey of finding what your candle wick is all about, which is unlit right now. Everybody's candle wicks unlit. You see, the problem is the mind is such a wonderful tool, but the mind, if it's the master, is the barrier. There's no way to get past the Gordian knot of it if there isn't something witnessing it. That's my hypothesis. There has to be something, and then this witnessing is not just something you sit and do on Sunday or on Sabbath or Friday, or just if you're a person who likes to practice mindfulness meditation, you just do it an hour a day and then let yourself completely go unconscious for the rest of the 23 hours. What I'm talking about has to become a thread in every moment of your life, waking and sleeping, active or inactive. And from this source, it can take the things from mind that it's scientific, actually. It's a subjective science is what I'm talking about. I mean, we have objective science that can learn the phenomenal world, but the scientist doesn't know himself. And that requires another science, which uses a scientific method to have a hypothesis. Is this thing that I am just a fantasy of chemistry in my brain, and when I die, it's all gone, like I never existed? The irony of that is that people who believe in that, I ask them, well, you're talking about nothingness, you're talking about oblivion. Where did you hear about these things but in this phenomenal life? When before you were born, you didn't know what nothingness or oblivion was. Did you? It's no. And so even to the atheists, I say, everything that you're saying to argue for atheism is from this phenomenal world and has nothing to do with what you brought into it. It just isn't, because because even nothingness is a concept of something. What if this that I'm talking about, if I were to even dare to come close, because no words can really grasp it, because it's bigger and smaller than any words can grasp. What if what I'm talking about absolutely doesn't exist, absolutely is not real at all, because it's even freer of that? Because existence is a thing. Non-existence is a thing. Something being there is a thing. Something not being there is a thing. But if you get the knack, you notice that there's something deep inside you that witnesses all these things and never changes, except that it's always eternally new. And it does not exist. Therefore, it cannot not exist. It's just not in the duality trap. And you can't name it because you are it. You will never see your own original face, because that's the source of seeing all the phenomenon that are not you, that are in this wonderful, amazing play of planets, totalitarianism, democracy, all this big cavalcade of different things dancing around that have this illusion that they exist and that they can solve their problems. They can't solve their problems because they are transitory. But there cannot be a knowing of that unless there's something in you that is eternal, that is the God spark, that is the source of the creator. And that everyone has.
So with that, John, let me just remind the audience, in the description box, we have a link to John's website. I've been posting it also in the chat box. Please go to that link. That will take you to his website, sign up for his periodical, do a reading if you would like. John, if you would like to just kind of describe those two products that you have. And also, John has lots of books that he has published. So, please buy his books too. But go ahead, John.
Start with the books. Just type in John Hogue, Johnhogue, when you go to Amazon and tab the books, and then you'll see a lot of my books there. There are 52 of them. Not all of them are in Amazon, but I've published 52 books in 22 languages. And then if you want to sample some of my thousands of articles, then and new ones, then join the Hogue Prophecy Report. If you go to my website, hogueprophecy.com, that's HOGUEPROPHECY.com. If you just type in John Hogue, it'll prompt up on your search engines. There's that website is there to give you free samples of some full articles and some excerpts of other articles that I produce roughly a month in between 2 months, or maybe a little longer. And they're sent to you as a PDF file, fully illustrated, and then I send them via email to you from the email that you use or tell me to use after purchase with PayPal. And that, what we just touch upon in words here, there's just volumes and volumes of stuff and stories and all kinds of things and examples that I could apply in the writing format. So that's one way. The other way is to have a one-on-one with me with the same backdrop, my office, where and all over the world, I do these Zoom readings on Zoom where I use free astrology that you can get from astro.com for free to send me. Has a really great aspectarian, so I can quickly go through the aspects. And I do your astrology, your Kelly Blue Book of the human body mind vehicle is what your astrology tells us as your potentials and the things to work on, the things that will come easy to you, so forth. And then we go deeper. In a lot of the reading is really a trance reading. Well, not trance reading, but it's just an oracular reading where I asked the people that want to do a reading to just tell me their story, can share their feelings, and in that way, I read you like I read the world. I start seeing the trends and things that you're saying that. And then I kind of can feel, okay, that's something that's happening. This is over there and not really happening. And it just starts happening, just like the way I go online to read the world, and the world is telling me all of its stories, presenting itself to me. And then I don't know how I do it. I was initiated into this by Osho, my master, in 1987 in India. And basically my work in this is my job is to do absolutely nothing. And in that space, falling into the presence of itness, things happen. I've been in that space all this interview. It has said a lot of things, but it comes from a space of no doing, but a kind of allowing, an opening, an innocence. And so I do that on a one-on-one with you. And it usually can last. It can be even 2 hours. So, plan to have some time, because it can be 2 hours sometimes, or a little more. And we go deep. The other thing I do is that I have little breaks every 40 minutes, given using Zoom free has given me a device that I think is quite remarkable to experience objectively. Part of this reading is relativistic in time. What will happen is there'll be a warning for the 10 minutes after 30 minutes have passed, and then we know that in another 10 minutes it'll black out, and then I'll send my invitation again to join Zoom, and we'll resume it in 10 minutes. But what will happen as we go through more and more of these, they get shorter and shorter. The experience of time changes in these readings. I don't know how it happens. You can watch your clocks. It's still saying 40 minutes, but they go faster and faster and faster. And perhaps one of the ways that can be explained best is the way Albert Einstein used to explain to people at Princeton University who were not able to understand the theory of relativity. They'd come up to him in a cocktail party, and he'd already had a one round or two. And so they come up and they had the courage to, and he'd say, Professor Einstein, can you explain to me what relativity is? And he said, with Marty, said, why, of course I can, Professor. It's really quite easy to understand it. When you're with your wife, an hour is an eternity. But when you're with your mistress, it just isn't long enough. The hour is like that. So he did actually say that. So experience it, see if you resonate with it, and then what also happens is sometimes if I feel that it's needed, I will share an email with the meditation techniques that it's a form letter thing that I put together as an email, which kind of introduces you to links and information that I share with you these meditations that I've been doing since 1980 that are Osho meditations, which are perfectly suitable for a new look at meditations for people living in a mind amplified world. And they have playful steps, some movement and dance sometimes, and then they end up with the final segment where you just sink right into watching. It's very easy. If you start with watching your breath and looking, it's always impossible. Yeah, that's the end. You have to shake your body free of energy. You have to then be playful with your energy like a child, and then sit down and let it settle like a sunset. And then in the final fourth 15 minutes, you either sit still or lay down on your back, and you really can start to sense this consciousness that is a mirror, like a mirror, that reflects everything before it without judgment for or against, including the judgments that come up. It will not judge them for or against. They will come up. The mind will come up. It just reflects it perfectly until the time comes when there's nothing to reflect, and it reflects its vast eternal freedom and its own lack of a thing to reflect upon.
All right, so I just want to remind the audience, thank you for watching the live stream on YouTube, also on my website. We had a good turnout today, and the ones that participated in X Spaces, I greatly appreciate it. And the ones that typed their questions on X or also in the chat, thank you very much. Please click the link that's in the description of this video, and also in the replays. I'm going to be replaying this on the 7 channels that I have. But please click the link and go to John's website, sign up for his periodicals, and sign up for a reading. So thank you again, John. I greatly appreciate you coming onto the show here on a regular basis. And I'm noticing, a lot of people are, commenting about how they enjoy the show. And
Good.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I enjoy all of you.
Okay, so John, you have to say goodbye to everybody before I shut down the system here.
Goodbye to everybody.
Okay. All right. So just stay there, John, because there's so many buttons I have to click to shut everything down. So just hold on.